together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight. Thank you for joining. Seriously, thank you for spending your valuable time with us. There's so many incredible events going across the planet right now. And I think the number one for me is looking at my wheel. The everlasting moon calendar. This month is going to be integral to getting your gardens out, started on time, max growth, all gas, no brakes. We just hit the full moon. So I have it on the 5th. Now, it might vary by your time zone. But as we come around, the best now time is going to be the 17th of the month. Again, when you want to start to dig and cultivate rising vitality. If you start to plant now, it's coming through the apex of the full moon, maximum moon energies. And every day for the next 15 days, it will be decreasing energy, decreasing energy, decreasing. There's even a term for this, the low barren period, low vitality, the barren period. Do not plant for these next, 10 days or so. Wait until the 17th and then start. And it's the maximum vitality. Everything's growing and rising. Just like these 400-year cycles that we're in. You can see right now that something very different and very gigantic is happening with the energies surrounding our solar system. The amount of change on this planet is reflecting that because we have the ability to manifest. So these awakening energies, if you will, I'm trying to bring it down into you understand, at least I do, the moon drives the tides. It brings more moisture up. It makes more moisture go away. Look at it that way, but in the soil and the aquifers getting pulled up an extra 2 or 3 feet during the rising vitality period, during the moon phases. So, Ransom, I appreciate you joining me tonight. What's going on? I'm just trying to think positive, get my mind frame planting something every single day from this point forward in the ground. That's my goal. 1, 2, 3, whatever, something in the ground every single day. Oh, and I did it again. I can't believe, Ransom. Hold on, I forgot to add you. I was so stoked on getting into the introduction, and I know you can hear me right now because we were chatting online a second ago. Well, snafu there, but anyway, welcome. Ransom, you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, take it away.
Well, you were talking about the solar system being, energetic. So I thought I would start with some pictures I found on the internet of Uranus here. Pretty trippy.
Yeah, I can find that in the mirror.
Yeah, well, not that one. Right? I just realized, that sounded pretty bad. But no, I was talking about this big blue energetic eyeball out there in space. It looks just like it's looking at us. I sent you a small one. I found a bigger one for everyone else to see. These are the new photos from the cool James Webb telescope. And it's pretty trippy, man. What do you think about that? I mean, because you're always pointing out these things that happen on the other planets and how they kind of come incoming. And by the way, I was looking at the supposed solar max there, and like the sun's almost completely clean of solar spots right now. So waiting on some earthquakes or something like that. Or we could start with I
got you a start, man. I got a start for you.
Okay, go ahead.
Could I continue on that planetary thing for just a second? Could I go on a ramble here?
Yeah.
Now, and then, please, I would like you to come right back in, but I wanted to preface what you just spoke about with Uranus, with that new image coming out. So I want to take you back a little trip in time here to 2020. If anybody can remember that, May 21st, 2020. Discover magazine puts out article. It says Pluto's weird atmosphere just collapsed. And then you read in, the atmosphere collapsed 20x in on itself. So the atmosphere became much thicker almost instantly within a few month period. And then December 15th, just a mere 6 months later, the dark storm on Neptune reversed direction. Remember that? Like the dark storm, Neptune's atmosphere reversed itself. And then later on, in April 16th of 2022, another 6 months after that, they'd done telescopes looking at temperature only on the planet, and they found a 17-year cool, but on a multi-17-year cool, drastic cooling from 2006 to 2020 on Neptune. The luminescence really, really dimmed down. It went from like a nice sort of candle glow all the way down into like looking at the candle glow through a bottle of syrup, kind of dark. And then also in 2021, here's the thing, X-ray flares came off of Uranus to the point that the visible eye could see them just like you could see with the X flare that would come off of our sun, where it has that X pattern within the sunspot group. Well, the same thing occurred, but the X-ray jumped off of the planet, and you could see where the line of electrical current was coming out because it illuminated once on the rings there as it was outbound with its X-ray flow. And then what do we have here? Jupiter. The aurora were glowing 10x more than normal at the same time of the X-ray event on Uranus. July 2021, auroras on Mars coming directly from the crust and the minerals and the metals in the crust. So wherever there was a mineral vein, auroras started popping out of that. It wasn't following on the poles because Mars doesn't have a magnetic north and south like ours does. But yeah, these auroras just rising out of the planet. Anywhere there was mineral veins, auroras electrically connected to that above the ground level and started glowing. So I wanted to leave it there, but that's what's happening also in addition to those images you sent me.
Yeah, some trippy stuff going on. And I think now more than ever that the ancients were onto something. I don't believe it exactly how they do it kind of with the astrology, like the Vedic astrology has, different behaviors that you'll have if you were born at a certain time and in a certain place. However, I do believe in gravitational effects, and we know that magnetism and gravity does affect life on Earth. So when you're looking out there in our own solar system and the planets are dancing around making new configurations of places that, God knows how long it's been since each one of these little configurations takes place. But I'm assuming that is going to directly affect the behavior of the animal life on Earth. Just as an assumption. But I was also wondering, what's going on with each of the planets. I haven't read too much into that, so I'm not going to say that I have. But I was wondering, are the magnetic poles on the other planets, barring Mars, because it has a messed up crust and no, specific poles like you were talking about. But some of these other planets do indeed have giant magnetic fields and obviously have not just 2, but 4 and sometimes 6 poles or 8 poles. From what I've read, that there can be multiple poles on that. So I was wondering what was probably going on with them. And then knowing the sun is so quiet when it's supposed to be at its solar max right now. So if this is the solar max, what's to come as far as, sun activities going on? Because it's very rare that you see from one of the satellites representations showing you the sunspots that almost the entire sun is just empty of them. It's just a perfect yellow ball right now. And I know that there is some connection with that and earthquakes. But just, back down to the planet here, I have been really questioning reality to the max from what's going on in Canada. I just happened across this thing where they were talking about how they're going to start locking people up for saying this, that, and the other thing. I don't want to get into it specifically, but what I was looking at on the television broadcast that they were giving, it looked like something out of some weird 70s rock cartoon, horror cartoon or something, with these people with the weird, it looked like demon outfits. It's just trippy stuff that's going on. And then you have all of these, dramas going on in Tennessee right now. I'm sure you know all about that. So they're going to continue this weird fake civil war that really no one in the masses cares about. It's because when you think about how many people are in the U.S. and then you look at these small little crowds that go to the Capitol buildings and they protest for this reason or that reason or the other reason, you realize that they are a super minority. But if you watch television or news media of any kind, especially through the mainstream outlets, and it's funny that did you see that thing about Twitter where they marked NPR as state-sponsored, sorry, I almost said the wrong phrase there, as state-sponsored media. I was going to say terrorism, but, it's terrorism of the mind, some of the stuff they're telling people. And in the background of this supposed manufactured culture war, and then they got the president and that whole drama there, you see the banks just buying up all the gold. They're buying up as much gold as they can right now. Companies are laying off. Other companies are saying stuff like this. Here's an article. Bosses want hard workers, so they're hiring old people. They're hiring old people because they know they'll work, because they have a good ethic. And yeah, just imagine that. So the actual workforce that is out there is non-desirable to any companies that are trying to stay in business right now. And then all across the financial news is banks are in turmoil. Bigger financial crisis may be brewing elsewhere. Let's see, here's another one. American farmers to begin. And this is another part. So the money's disappearing, and you can clearly see that they are advertising and pushing Brinks matter of fact, I think it just surpassed the dollar as far as the bigger economy goes. And then you have articles like this, which I've been paying attention to. I don't know if we can talk about. I think I can talk about that in code. Well, so I'll just talk
Ransom,
about it.
What do you mean about the grains and the farmers? Are they losing their subsidies where they can't grow grain efficiently enough for the price to get it to market?
Well, there's that kind of thing going on. But what I was talking about is a complete replacement of the food from top to bottom from the companies. And this month is when they're going to start rolling out. So if you remember in 1991, they rolled out GMOs to the market. And you can look into that, and there might be some diet trends and different things that might have led to certain aspects of the demographics of the U.S. changing as far as obesity or getting, not just obesity, but OCD as well, because, everybody's on drugs. So there's OCD and then there's obesity going on, and that might be connected CBDC. To the food. But yeah, but so we skip forward to now, and they're about to introduce this brand new, and I watched the company's video of it. It was really, really trippy. So what they're going to do is they're going to grow things like lettuces, potatoes, etc. Just you think of it, you name it, they're going to be growing it, from corn to wheat, everything. So they're going to grow it starting off gene edited from the beginning. And then what they're going to do is they're going to put it in a vat of liquid that contains mRNA particles for a specific purpose. I can't say what that purpose is, but anyway, they soak the vegetables, the plants in it, and then they replant it and allow it to grow so that it produces these little molecules that kind of resemble a life form that's not a life form, if you know what I mean. Like there's bacteria and fungus, but the
like
little
a chain
smaller
link kind of.
Yeah, the smaller thing that's not technically a life form, but it is a life form. But anyway, it's going to produce a substance like this that mimics that. And then move over to beef and milk. They're going to be adding another regimen of medication that humans recently took part in. So I'll leave it at that. And then, from across the board, everything we've talked about the last couple of years is coming so fast that our predictions, like last week when we were talking about Brinks and we were talking about some other stuff, I look up and now all of the major news networks are basically mimicking what we said in weeks prior about things. And then I see articles like this. Creepy robot dogs being deployed to patrol neighborhoods in Australia. So you can imagine what's going to be happening soon. And if you listen to Fauci, he says, we're all in danger from another episode in 2024. He has a specific date that he thinks this episode, that a rerun, if you will, of the last couple of years is going to happen. And then, like I said, look what the people, they always say follow the money. And when I'm looking at the money, what I'm seeing is central bank gold buying shows no sign of slowing down. If that doesn't tell you exactly what's going on in the entire world right now, I don't know what does. And then I know you know a lot about geopolitical stuff as far as Taiwan and China. And here's the new kind of stories coming out of China saying that they are going to start boarding all ships that go into the Taiwan Strait with the destination of Taiwan. And you know what this means? A lot of people don't know what this means, but as soon as they cut off Taiwan from ships coming in, the rest of the world ain't getting no more microchips. You know what I'm saying? No more chips and salsa for nobody. And that will be the one of the markers that starts a kinetic war in the South China Sea, which I've been saying is going to happen. But now it seems like all the mainstream media is finally catching up to what we've been talking about. So I would expect it all to happen at the end of this year, all of it. A semi-kinetic war with China. I think what they'll start doing is destroying each other's drones first. And then it'll escalate from there. And then, think about this, this kind of sums it up too, this article that I was talking about. Companies want to hire old people to work because young people don't know how. They have no work ethic. They don't know how to use tools. They don't know basic math, but they do know what gender they are at least. I mean, there's that. Now that's the weather right now.
Awesome, Amente. Because I'm thinking about the CBDCs, right? Like we did start talking about a few things that were rolling in. And I do remember coming across an article just a few hours ago that said Chinese ships are going to start boarding Taiwanese ships in the Taiwan Strait. Well, that ain't going to go down. The first one that happens to, you're telling you right there, that's a direct escalation right there, right then. So look further afield than that type of information. Okay, so the geopolitical landscape is one thing. But what about the climate landscape? Because Ransom and I have also been talking about the Hunga Tonga eruption and the massive disruption to agriculture across the southern hemisphere, that there would be incredible early freezes coming in because more water vapor and temperature cooling across the deeper southern latitudes, say from like 40 south down to Antarctica. Well, here we got some stories. Monthly low temperatures fall in Argentina. New marks of like 4 degrees Celsius below zero, which is in the low 20s. Below zero, right around 26, 27 degrees. These are not normal, and these include different, the area they call quote-unquote Patagonia. Practically all of Patagonia crashed below freezing over the weekend. That included Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, southern Brazil. Now, the food shortages that are about to also be enhanced by the catastrophic runaway ozone depletion event. The amount of ice crystals in the mesosphere, and I would encourage everybody to do the research on this. There's a layer in the atmosphere called mesosphere. It's above where the ozone is. And if ice crystals get up there, usually it's from meteorites shooting in through the atmosphere that leave a smoke trail. Well, that'll be a base for ozone to jump onto and break down from an O3 molecule into an O2 oxygen and get stripped by chlorine or bromine. So if you think about the number of ice crystal surfaces originally after the Hunga Tonga eruption. They were saying it might be 10 to 100 times more ice crystals up there in this layer of the atmosphere. But in reality, it's hundreds of thousands to millions of times more ice crystals in the mesosphere than normal. The ozone will be breaking down incredibly fast this year. So what you want to do is keep your eyes on the southern hemisphere ozone hole. It's going to onset early. And at the same time, the UVB radiation will hit the ground across the entire southern hemisphere, in Antarctica most heavily, but it'll start working its way up the latitudes also. 40 south, a lot of food growing there. What if the ozone hole depletion is so great and so vast that the UVB rocks up to like 30 degrees south? The insects, the bird life, the human life, the sea life, plant life, everything is going to be affected by this event. So they can distract you with a smaller something over there. You're not looking at the gigantic. The food shortages are the thing that's being distracted away from this second. The society and our civilization has never existed without food. The more abundant the food supply, the greater that wealth is created and people have free time, and the free time turns into the arts and engineering and creativity and invention. The more food you have, the higher apex of your society can become, because that main thing, food, is taken care of by others. But when you come into a time where a global food supply contracts 20% per year, the society is going to have to do the same thing. And that's what I'm saying. These elite have understood this cycle that was onsetting right now, and they're riding on top of the natural cycle to get a greater outcome. This was going to happen with or without you. Whether you screwed in another curly Q bulb or whatever, LED, or you drive an electric car or whatever, you air dry your hands because you don't want to use a paper towel, whatever. This was all going to happen in any way, with regardless of what you'd done. Not CO2, not you. It's the sun. And the thing is, when you come into these really beginning onset of getting into low solar activity, like that onset where we are right now, where this solar cycle, everybody was claiming it was going to be super high, bigger than ever, and it's just stalled. I mean, completely stalled right in the middle when it should be going right to solar max. If it drops off a cliff, that would be interesting. That would definitely set off atmospheric circulation changes, in addition with the atmospheric circulation changes from the Hunga Tonga eruption back in January of 2021. Huge volcanism events are associated with this grand solar minimum event. Generally, the largest of the eruptions that interfere with agriculture occur in the onset, sliding into the beginning of the cycle, and coming out of the cycle after everything's disturbed. The magnetic field has set sort of a stabilization again, and then suddenly the sun turns back on its magnetic field, and oops, the Earth's at a different state of magnetism, and it needs to equalize again. So it's going to do something jerky and quick, like and it's back to normal again. It's equalized with the sun. So generally, through the last, say, 3,000 years, they find when low solar activity happens, right off the peak, coming before it's even really registerable in history of being multi-years in advance, and you can see that the temperature had dropped, or there's usually a jolt of the planet, and volcanism happens, and larger earthquakes. We experienced one of those volcanic events last year. This time it was a water vapor event versus an ash and sulfur dioxide event. Nonetheless, it was the largest eruption in 200 years. And you cannot tell me that the largest water vapor eruption possibly in thousands of years, because it was water vapor eruption, not silica or volcanic ash or dust and sulfur dioxide and these types of aerosols. It was not that. It was pure water vapor. I'll go back in history and find when the last huge, large water vapor event, and they say around 535, 536 AD. Adding 10% more moisture to the atmosphere in a single event. So when you trace back 1,500 years, they find that, yeah, there was a huge amount of atmospheric changes. Everything was much more humid. People responded differently. Crops responded differently. And there was problems after that. But if you knew those cycles every 1,500 years would occur, and you'd been studying this for 100,000 years or 200,000 or 500,000 years, you would know that every 1,500 years there was an opportunity for your clan to come in and control the farm and give all the excuses which were written in the media of the time, whether it be scrolls or whether it be, leather-bound books or whether it's digital now. But it was natural, and it is natural and shall continue. But who had the information would know the onset date, they would know the intensity of it, and they would know how much a society would need to be adjusted based on the incoming changes, so that same clan could retain power and wealth through the transition that would normally collapse everything anyway. But to milk as much as your clan could and bring it into the new system, which you would also know the onset of the strengthening of the magnetic field. You would also understand when agriculture would come back and snapping back like a rubber band in an instant, like 1 or 2 seasons, whoosh, we're right back to the very stable plant and harvest dates. But if you knew the chaos period and the chaos dates, that'd be incredibly valuable for a lot of people. So anyway, Ransom, I'm going to leave it there because I kind of ran out of my thought on that one.
What's weird about that, I just did another show about 536 AD, and I don't know, I was just searching the internet right now. I was trying to find the exact, what the solar activity was right then. Because, it's somewhat of a mystery what kind of led to the chain of events that happened they give 536 a year, but it was more like 20 years or 30 years of stuff happening from the stuff I've been researching, because something first happened in the sky, allegedly, and they have found cosmogenic particles in the ice core samples. So they know that it wasn't just volcanoes. But something triggered, and this is the reason I fixate kind of on this event. Not only is it considered the worst year to be alive, but it was like the worst decade, worst 100 years. But right in that 100-year period from 500 to 600, all around the world, empires were just disappearing and others were just popping up in their place to, kind of like new ways of living, or empires figured out how to deal with what was going on. But I link that to the closest thing that you can compare to the world right now, because at any time, for multiple different reasons, maybe something did come from the sky that deposited, lots of dust and material that triggered volcanic activity, or was it the sun that did it? Whatever the reason was, volcanoes were going off all around the world. And now there's a lot of evidence saying that one of the volcanoes connected to Krakatoa there, so part of the superstructure of Krakatoa, popped its top. And at that same time in Japan and China, people were talking about this loud sound that came from that direction, and then yellow dust and, the whole thing. But even before that, in 526, there was a giant earthquake right around Syria and Turkey that killed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. And this was before even any of the volcanic eruptions. And to kind of circle it around, I was thinking, what did that do to the you were talking about some of these elite people that may know the longer cycles, like of the sun, et cetera. They might not be able to pinpoint it down perfectly, but they know right about the decades that it's going to happen. But if you think about back then, all of these, ancient societies, if you want to call them that, were solar worshiping. A good portion of everybody on the planet had some kind of worship that involved the sun. And then for one day for it to just stop coming, one day and then the next day, and you're wondering what's going on, the third day and the fourth day and the fifth day, and now it's weeks. And all of the people that didn't realize that something strange was happening and didn't save seeds and didn't save food, or at least escape away from other people that were now starting to starve and have diseases, we wouldn't even have a civilization right now. So that is like one of the most single events in history that changed civilization all around the world. And it's not even spoken of that much, but at any time, something similar could happen to us right now. And with this weak solar max and that being tied to earthquakes and volcanism, we may just have a similar circumstance. Hopefully it isn't as bad as what's described in those decades, but we know there was volcanoes going off in Mexico and Central America and Greenland. And then, like I said, Krakatoa, probably several others around the Eurasian continent and some in the Mediterranean, all popping their tops all at the same time. And not just once, but twice. and 3 times. So you can imagine the amount of debris that was just in the worldwide atmosphere. And then when you think about Hunga Tunga being the biggest explosion we've ever witnessed, basically, I mean, not too many people were so close to it because of where it is, but a sonic blast went around the Earth 3 times. So can you imagine 1, 2, or 3, or 4 of those going off in a 5-year period, putting up not just water debris like Hunga Tunga, but lots of land as far as chunks of islands and chunks of mountains, and just blowing all of that material along with the sulfur and carbon dioxide. And then that brings you to the joke. There was no one driving SUVs back in 536 AD. The cows were farting. The wildlife was farting. Everybody was farting. They were having a jolly good time. And then all of a sudden, it was cold. It was real cold, and there was no sun. 4 hours a day. Can you imagine trying to grow food in 4 hours a day? You would have had to live someplace that was being somehow untouched by world events. And I don't know where that place would be, because we don't have records from some of the people around the world. Like, I was wondering what was going on in Australia. What were they doing in New Zealand? The Aboriginals that were there living through that time period. And people colonizing all over the place is the only reason we have the records we do. But can you imagine all of the people that we just they didn't leave a note because they just disappeared?
Yeah, and how quickly was the downfall? These archaeologists try to give us let's talk about the Anasazi or the Hopi, something like this. How about the Mississippian peoples? You don't hear much about them. You always hear about the Aztecs, the Mayans, these sort of things, like the famous well-knowns. But what about the Blackfeet, or going over with some of the Cherokee peoples, First Nations, all the way around the Mississippi, up and down, east and west? Some of these cities were like 40 miles from one destination to another in similar fashion that we would consider a megalopolis of city connecting to city connecting to city. So you got to think about how those pyramidal structures and the burial mounds, some of them being 250 feet tall, that's a 25-story building. These earthworks were vast across America, vast, but they were all bulldozed, used for construction materials. Like there was in tandem, unison. Use everything of the old world to destroy it, to use for a new product or a new type of, okay, got to build a highway, put it across, build the highway directly on the old Indian trading road. So if we look at it on maps, it's over there. Any artifacts, you can build out 2 lanes deep plus an inner thing, so we can go, 100 feet either direction of the trading trail, make sure we scrape up all the artifacts off of that, make sure they're totally buried. Nobody can even excavate along the trails anymore. It seems like this is done on unison and in purpose. So, looking back in history, how long really has it been like this? If we're coming into some sort of magnetic anomaly and a liquefaction event where, some of the planet or a majority of the planet would have water oozing, mud, etc., out of the crust here coming up around 2024, October, magnetically, something strange. I've had people write me and ask, hey, you've been talking about the planet's top mile of the crust starting to pull and rift as we approach the second magnetic field in October of 2024. I've spoken about this since 2018, 19. The top mile of the crust, not the entire planet, but just the top mile of the crust, is going to behave like silly putty moving forward. So these unexplained landslides. And somebody wrote to me and said, hey, I'm wondering how many of those train derailments are because of faulty equipment actually, or planned, or, people putting things on the tracks or whatever, compared to what you'd said, like maybe some of those train derailments are actually where the crust had pulled 8, 10, 12 feet, but the explanation had to be there as it was derailment. They never talk about the natural causes. What about these pipelines? What about these fiber optic cables, things breaking and snapping? Would that not be a rift in the earth of between 50 and 100 feet somewhere? Fiber optic cables going down, an enormous amount of things happening. Like everywhere you look, there's infrastructure breaking, bridges pulling across, pulling off of the banks on the opposite side of the river, whichever one held tightest. These are the types of things. Renumbering the runways because the magnetic field is moving that quickly that the runways need to be renumbered for orientation when landing and taking off. updating the world magnetic model 3 years early. You know, something is going on here that is way beyond. But you think about it, for humanity, it would be one of the biggest uplifting times because the magnetic fields are changing, and we see this conundrum that we're stuck in is mostly a distraction from the upcoming food shortages, but also sadly a distraction and a direct interference from humans reaching their full potential of coming into that stasis and equalization with the creative force itself, living in harmony within vibratory patterns around and within the earth. Like that is being stripped and forced away from us. Again, with the same clan that knew what the cycles were, when they onset, when the intensity would occur. So the volcanic eruptions, okay, it's not going to take much to disrupt supply chains on the ag side of things, to cause a global panic, to create the food shortages. And because of the food shortages, in the beginning, things are going to cost you double, triple, quadruple, 5x more. And I've said this last year too, but I think my timeline was off by 6 months. And as it gets so expensive, they're going to try to use the excuse of the collapsing economy. People are complaining so much and they care so much about you that they need to switch you over to a digital rationing card and a central bank digital currency at the same time because you have the right to eat. So they're going to make sure that everybody has access to food in the beginning because it's a human right, the right to food. But if you're going to get that right to food, you have to get on the digital rationing card, which will involve some sort of biometrics, of course. And you can see where it all goes to. Like one leads to the other, to the other, to the other. Like one is the result of the last or the next step to the next. You know, nothing stays static, and it's a plan, man. It's a plan.
Just another one in a long line of resets, and it's you brought up the Mississippian culture. That's another culture, at least the Cahokian culture, is another one of those that just popped up after about 536 AD. There's, you know, we know that around the world there was cold times, there was drought, there was flooding, all of this stuff was going on, crop failures worldwide. You know, in China, they were losing 80% of their population. And then you look over here in the Americas, right about 600, they start building pyramids along the Mississippi River. They start building these giant, you know, configurations of stuff that are obviously solar orientated and lunar orientated. So I don't know where they came from, but they just popped up kind of there, and that they started doing that. But ironically, down in Mayan territory, there's some description of what happened. You know, the volcano goes off, crops are flooded with ash, the rivers are jammed up with stuff, people are starving, people start to fighting. And then for about 100 years, the Mayans don't do anything, nothing. And you brought up the Anasazi. That's another group of people that just popped up right after this event happened in the Southwest, where all over the Southwest, people were basically living like hunter-gatherers. But then all of a sudden, Chaco Canyon, 600, you know, they're building that. And it's obviously also orientated to the sky. So all around the world, people were really tripping out about what was going on, that the earth had changed so fast in just a couple of decades. One generation, everything on the earth was different. And now you're talking about, you know, power lines, gas, and all of these other things that have pipelines in the ground. And ironically, the Cahokian civilization, they disappear, but they left a lot of evidence that they were dealing with severe droughts for hundreds of years. And then all of a sudden, there's this silt all over everything. So we know the Mississippi just, boom, it flooded. And they all had to move, and their civilization didn't disappear. It just morphed into something else. But which brings me to now, that we're resetting. You know, when you think about all these civilizations popping up, then and another one disappearing, what's going to be after the U.S.? Well, it seems like they're already aligning that up for a whole world government ran by either the Chinese or the Anglo-Saxon side of the world government, which is basically so intertwined at this point that if one fails, the other fails. So there's no telling what kind of shenanigans that they'll do to reduce population and give reasons for why there's no food. Because that, again, that was another time in the past where we know all around the world people were starving. They were just, there was no food. They weren't growing nothing all of a sudden. It was too late to say, we need to get out there and grow some stuff because the weather had changed and there really was no sun. So there wasn't any catching up. So you imagine the situation that today's world with 8 billion people would have to deal with if there were massive earthquakes, not just one or two here and there like we deal with now, but like multiple going off at one time and several volcanic events. And then the idea of, the earth moving around, popping all these pipelines. Where would civilization go? What would it do? Well, there's no place left to go. So everyone would have to pretty much sit where they are and have to ride through it. And obviously, large portions of the population wouldn't be able to do that. And that's why they're trying to fill the last days, so to speak, in my opinion, with super distractions. And then in the background, you see every avenue of where it goes around the central banking system seems to be mysteriously, having problems. I know that you can count several people that were doing digital currency and had a coin and they died for, whatever reason. And then did you see the thing about the Cash App founder getting stabbed to death? It's almost like a message is being sent out that you will not get around the system. And then, all of the stores are now turning to automation and security. And I think that's what this phase is kind of for the corporate world, is this is the transition to the customer's always right to the customer is a prisoner. And we will tell them what they're going to buy and how much it's going to cost and how much you can get per month and when you can go shopping and all of that stuff is all getting lined up. And then you're not going to be able to complain to no manager. Here's a story from Zero Hedge. Mass automation to sweep across Walmart stores by 2026. That would be 2 years after, I'm going to say there's been 2 years of hard times at that point. So they already have it all planned out, what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And that's slowly squeeze the supply to where there's way more demand than there is supply. And then we will see utter chaos around the globe.
Well, the snowplows are out in Hawaii. Mauna Kea, blizzard, snow continues to fall. I was over on Electroverse, one of my favorite sites. He's had to switch sites a couple of times, so electroverse.info. Monthly low record temperatures fall across the western U.S. April blizzards break historical benchmarks. Snowplows in Hawaii. April cold records fall across Europe. Avalanches across India. That's just one headline. The water vapor that came up from that Hunga Tonga eruption is going to have an effect in the northern hemisphere here when we come into our planting season. I'm going to say something that's very messed up with the last week of March, early week of April weather. It was nearly 90 degrees yesterday, but a few days prior it was into the 20s. That's very, very unusual to get into the low 20s in this late into March, not normal. But then the gargantuan swing up into the 90 Fahrenheit almost was like 89 degrees. Something is amiss with the atmospheric flows. You go back to the 1816 aftermath of the 1815 Tambora eruption, equatorial in Indonesia. 3-degree temperatures swing average across Europe. But it seemed that the winter hung on longer into spring, and there were so many ice events, like hail events coming out of the sky, unusual frost and freezes. Average temperature across the lows was 3 degrees Celsius lower. So you think about that, that's almost 6 degrees Fahrenheit. Can you knock 6 degrees Fahrenheit off your average low temperature? That would bring you into freezing so early. And that's exactly what happened. So for us to sit here and say, well, nearly the same thing happened, biggest eruption in 200 years, And to think that the atmosphere will not be affected by that, that was 10% more moisture added into the atmosphere in a single day. Think about the blockage pattern in the moisture in the atmosphere itself. They're just the clouds. They're going to bunch up in a lot of places. They're going to push flows around. Those cloud cells are chugging extra hard. They're going uphill. They're fully super laden with water, so they're going to slow down a bit. Like when you consider that slowdown in rotation of the cloud cells, like the Hadley cell would probably be the most famous. That's from the equator up to 30 north or from the equator to 30 south. First band there, Hadley cells. Since the Hungatonga eruption was 20 degrees south latitude, it's definitely in that. Now think about it. We're separated by the equator. The eruption occurs in a cloud cell in the southern hemisphere. That thing is going to drag so much more slowly across the entire equatorial band. And you think, okay, well, that's in the southern hemisphere. Well, not really, because it's connected at the equator, at the doldrums. But then a little bit north of the doldrums, the winds pick back up again. That slowing drag is making the system cavitate a little bit. The entire cloud motion of the planet is cavitated. This explains a lot. Now, where do we go from here is an unknown. A year without a summer, the way the classic indication is, you'll have a freeze or a frost in July. You'll have a heavy, deep freeze and frost in June that will wipe out everything, because they always say, plan after May 15th, you're totally cool. But this would send exceptionally low freezing temperatures already into summer started plants. They would wipe out your entire garden in a second. But what is it going to happen this time? Because the signs are all around us, especially the southern hemisphere now showing this such record cold so early. And I saw 68,000 farms in California are unable to plant. It is just too wet. And I look at that and I say, whoa, that's pretty interesting. And then apparently these were lake areas that they had dried out over the last how many decades. And I'm trying to find the thing of it here. Joe, hold on. Yeah, Prado Dam is overflowing, and all these little dams are filling up Tulare Lake. Now, as this fills up, there's nowhere for it to really spill out. It's just going to fill up, and then it needs to dehydrate and evaporate for it to lower itself back to practical and usable farm space. So wherever you're looking across the planet, there's disruptions in the ag. So I'm just wondering if the Ukraine-Russia thing wasn't also a dance to explain away more food shortages. And now add in the hyperinflation and the devaluing dollar and the digital rationing cards, and it all makes sense that the biggest is about to come. So it's like if you've ever been surfing and you're going out, you're paddling out, and then suddenly you get caught on the inside and a big ass set is coming through, like rolling through, like double overhead, triple overhead. And like you're scratching to get out and you punch under that one wave. And as you squeak out the back, you'll understand immediately that you've gone through the biggest wave of the set and it's kind of safe. Or you punch out the back and you're like, oh no, that's the biggest wave of the day. And you got to scratch like, oh no, please, not on the head. Boom. But if you can get through this first wave, which is coming now, and be able to duck under it, you know, that next wave, you're further out, it's safer, you're deeper out in the water, safer. And maybe you'll just scratch over the next one and it won't be as bad as you think. Or it'll be the big set, but you're not going to get crushed on the reef being stuck way inside. You'll survive it way better than those who are afraid of even getting out in the water. You know? The Great Reset is here, and it's taken a different shape, fashion, and form than I had anticipated it to. Although a lot of similarities were there. You knew they were going down with the control of food. But it's just taken so many right and left turns. It's bizarre to look at it. It's bizarre to look at it. It'd almost be looking like a pure white marble Colosseum in the middle of Greece or Rome.
Well, how long can we have the bread and circus? you were talking about all of these different supply chain interruptions on the food, and I see them all over the place. And they're really, it seems like it's designed more to scare you than maybe get you used to not being able to get stuff. So here's this article that I found here that's talking about listeria contamination in all of the lettuces, and they go through all of these different companies. And remember, the last time we were talking about how much the spices and herbs and stuff were contaminated with heavy metals, and this one's talking about, you got to be careful not to eat this stuff. They found it in all of these different brands. I'm kind of showing them there. I'm not going to name them all, but just listen to this. So you're thinking about going to the store and getting some nice vegetables to go with your meat that you got at home. Maybe next month it'll have a new ingredient, but here we are to the lettuces. So if you're not growing your own food, you got to deal with stuff like this. Ingested food contaminated with listeria, the organism that causes listerias, if I said that right, can cause serious and sometimes fatal infections in young children, frail and elderly people, and otherwise weakened immune systems. The FDA said that this infection can cause miscarriages, stillbirths among pregnant women, as well as short-term symptoms such as high fever, severe headache, stiffness, nausea, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. Doesn't that just make you want to grow your own food right there? I mean, like, just that article alone, I don't want to eat what they got going on. There's no telling what's in it. And then on top of that, did you not notice that those symptoms are real similar to other things? Like, so people wouldn't even know that they had this, they think they just got this or that. And really, it's can cause serious, sometimes fatal problems. And this is just from eating a salad from the store. And then, right there on the same article, I'm not going to click on it, but there's another one, protein bars. So now protein bars sold at Costco, recalled from stores in 8 states. You can't even trust the food that's out there 100% of the time, or even 50% of the time. So what are we going to do in the near future when you know for a fact that the food at the stores are not good for you in a major way? Not like before when you were worried about eating junk food, and then we started worrying about the GMOs. What's that going to do? And the high fructose corn syrup, and the cholesterol, and the trans fat. And they've had all of these waves of things that you're not supposed to eat in the food. And then they tell you eggs are bad for you, eggs are good for you. So it seems like the whole entire plan for like decades was to keep everyone completely ignorant of what kind of food to eat, when it seems so simple that our parents and grandparents were just eating normal, regular food, like regular stuff. It didn't have anything in it. And if you notice, they were all healthier. Just like you can't find anybody with the OCD or obesity back in the past, like the world's fattest man was this little guy that's like the smallest guy at Walmart right now. This is the world that we live in, at the same time as being nutritionally defunct or deficient. I mean, so where do we get the food? If you don't know a rancher, or you don't know a farmer, or you're not ranching, or you're not farming yourself, it seems like we're in a real predicament.
Yeah, at that point too, like once it gets to that realization point, then what? You're going to have to make the choice. Plus, a lot of people will be around you like, no, it's not happening. There's nothing there. No, it won't be bad one time. Oh, do we really have to do that again? Oh, one more time we have to do this? No. We got to eat that again. Like, yeah, some crazy choices are going to need to be made. Now, I'm lucky I have a meat source, but what happens if 1,000 other people want to go to that same meat source? Then what? What if 10,000? Because you have to think, in a city of, let's say, 200,000 people, a few thousand of them have enough money to go buy a full goat or a full sheep or a lamb, a calf, something like this, pig, a full pig, and then bring it, have it slaughtered at the Amish farm, and then bring it out and then take it home and butcher it yourself. A lot of people will pay for that. There's going to be an enormous amount of competition when it really comes to that. So what does that lead you to then? You're going to have to be a producer, not just a consumer. So, focus on protein and meats first. What kind of things do you think you'd be able to put up to be able to produce protein in a pinch? Like rabbits, quail? I don't know. But if you're cut off the system where you're really going to get sick if you eat the food, you're going to have to really stay off that system. We'll be back in a couple minutes here. David DuByne, Ransom, Godwin. Remember not to plant until the 17th. Full moon horizon.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after. Thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Maybe we had a dropped call, I think. Can you guys still hear me?
Oh, I had the mute on. I can't believe it. I was speaking, saying, welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations, and the mute button was on. I can't believe it. Oh, well, that is life. But it really is about talking about the solutions tonight with this seemingly ever-changing world and the mix of the natural and also the planned, the man-planned, not even man-made, man-planned. Clan-planned is a better way to put it. The moneyed clan that keeps moving gold into its own reserves. Century after century, millennia after millennia, the same gold holders are still the same gold holders after 6,000 years. So we're back into another cycle of reset. And Ransom, I know you were saying something just before the break, and we hit it up, but back to you, man. Kick us off for the second hour. Thank you, Revolution Radio, for giving us this venue here to stream off of live. Thank you for the Rumble listeners, the BitChute listeners, Vigilante TV, shout out. Twitter, Facebook, hello. And the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast, and Ransom's highly regulated channel, Mountain High Time. What a wonder world. You can't even spread information. It's as easy as spreading dandelion seeds, which, by the way, are out there. Think about the wild foraging for your greens right now. It is an abundant forest of really soft greens coming out everywhere right now. So this is your 2 to 3 weeks to get up as much free greens coming straight from the earth, full of vitamins, nutrients, minerals directly from the earth to you. Early in the season, not a lot of stuff's been sprayed around yet, so it's a good time to pick wilds.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into the planning, but I'm concerned we're going to have one more freeze here because I live next to part of the Rocky Mountains. So usually around Easter, we get one more cold blast traditionally, but the weather's been kind of weird everywhere. If you haven't noticed, there's been a really lot of snow on the Rocky Mountains, which means there's going to be a bunch of floods. And, you know, I think I understand kind of the food shutdown and the way that so what you guys think of traditional food that you get from the store, that's all going to be shut down. And then you're only going to have one choice of a kind of food, so to speak, all of a sudden. And that's what bothers me. And it makes me wonder, is that part of the reason that they're pushing eats the bugs? Is, you know, because I'm seriously thinking about it. If I can't trust my pork, my chicken, my beef, am I going to have to get out there and catch my own bugs? You know, because I don't want to eat bugs. But the idea of eating manufactured goods, so to speak, and knowing that the food supply is tainted with any number of aspects of bad things for us, including, you know, we could just talk about some of the stuff that you're allowed to talk about: plastic contamination, bacterial contamination, viral contamination, like we were talking about, and you know, on and on and on. And then across the board, you just see, you know, it's hard for me to wrap my head around, like I was saying in the first half, that we've got to a point where it's hard for me to look at reality and not feel like I'm part of the Truman Show and I'm watching a scripted television broadcast. I see clowns on TV. I see the entire infrastructure just falling apart. You know, it's so close to that movie Idiocracy that it's really, really scary. And, that's just a comedy. The guy was being satirical, but joking about the trends that are coming in the future. And then here we are. It's some short years later. You didn't even have to go that far in the future. And we're doing exactly that. Like the article I showed about Walmart, and I'm sure Walmart's not the only one that's going to go to a completely automated system. So they're going to have a few guys back in the warehouse, only making sure that the robots don't knock over stuff and do stuff. So basically what you're going to do is drive in, and they've been planning it for a long time. Matter of fact, you can participate right now. You can order your stuff online. You can go down there, and some kid will bring out a floor jack full of your order. And half the time it's not what you ordered. It's replaced, mischarged. And, so you get this, and then you go home, and that's what you get. And, people are like, oh, I don't want to go back. And then if you're in the store, you realize, well, the shelves are empty, and my favorite kinds of foods are gone. I'm looking for specific stuff. It ain't there. So you have to, settle for what's there. And this is going to become increasingly bizarre, as the only food available is stuff that you're not looking for. So I'm genuinely asking, am I going to have to eat bugs to not eat manufactured programs, so to speak? And even then, I keep reading because I'm a nerd. So I'm always reading. And, I'm looking into this new science of the plants talking to me. I'm thinking, is there a way that is there a useful algorithm in the future that we live in, like where we could get an algorithm and listen to what the plants say? Because there's a new study that came out of Israel that talks about how plants are talking, and they're talking in vocabulary more than what we thought before. They're screaming in agony. They're screaming in pain, if you want to call it that. And they're clicking, and they're doing all these other things. But they've realized that they make certain noises, like when they want water, when they need nutrients, whenever they're uncomfortable about the heat or the cold. So there was already this weird scientific breakthrough that we could have had with the plants, but instead we went down the GMO, gene editing, manipulation route. And now we're faced with a situation where it's not that futuristic dystopic world. We're living in it now. And I'm going to skip from food to technology. If you've been paying attention to this new bill that they're trying to, the TikTok thing, I forgot what the name of it is already. But I was reading some of it. So basically what it is the government is found a way to legalize themselves, looking through your cameras, accessing your mics, and looking at all of the messages you send back and forth through the social media companies and messaging platforms. So what they're trying to do is give themselves new powers, because they already do it. It's just illegal. So if they make it legal, then they don't have to justify themselves anymore. And then across the board, they're just letting these companies wither away and disappear money, and no one knows really where it went. It's all entangled into so many different aspects of stocks, bonds, and what I read an article that was talking about the non-financial services or services that are attached to banks are really going to be the reason why everything collapses. So we're looking at a scenario where money is not available. There's limited food at the store. The food that is there at the store has been tampered with in ways that you don't want to consume. And then you're left with, trying to use these same box stores to get your supplies to farm and to garden. And if they're, adding products to the food, don't you think they would be adding products to the accessories to your gardening? For example, I've been buying organic soil. Is supposed to be organic soil for the last couple of years. I've been going to get several bags, and what I find in is chunks of plastic, wrappers, bags. I found a hypodermic needle in it one time, and I'm thinking this is supposed to be organic soil, and look at the contamination just in it. It makes me want to send Mike Adams like a chunk of it and tell what is in this. So that guy, if we're allowed to talk about him online, I don't know if we are or not. He's one of those people that have been depersoned on the internet, but he does all kinds of tests. I know you know him, and you know about that. I've been reading a lot of them, from hamburger meat to pet food. everything has something in it that does not belong there. Hamburger meat, they tested organic hamburger meat, and what's in it? A bunch of little plastic strands that look like, I can't say what it looks like. That's the sad thing about it, is we can't even talk openly, and it's getting worse. I'm sure you noticed or heard about the guy that made the meme about the election, and they gave him 10 years or potentially 10 years. I don't know if they've actually sentenced him. I think they did. I think they're giving him 10 years for making a meme that affected no one and everyone knew was fake. So that means you can't even joke around online without the fact checkers coming to, say that whatever you said is not true. And then beyond that, in countries around the world, we're now starting to arrest people for ideas. So we are living in a very scary future dystopian, but only the future to people that lived in the 50s, because I think, they saw the end of the world before them, and we're seeing the end of the world as we know it. And that's kind of why I named the episode tonight. Is this really the last year that we're going to recognize food, money, and civilization all together as something that we can recognize and take part in? Because as far as I can tell, from entertainment to political things, I can't be involved in the stuff that they're doing. And I'm in a position right now where I have a 17-year-old that I've been forcing to read a lot of history. Well, and now I don't have to force him. Now he's totally interested in it, and he's reading, and he comes to me like every 15 or 20 minutes asking me to compare something that's going on right now to something that the SS Nazi were doing. And he is finding everything. And I can't lie to him. I'm saying, yeah, it is the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. It's just different people are doing it right now in a different way. I think that I don't want to, get you in trouble, but the process that the SS used to destroy human beings is now morphed into a scientific cult where people want you to join it, and they found new ways of doing it. But there's no doubt that this planet is at a point where everyone knows that the elite for decades, even hundreds of years, have been planning on the idea of reducing population because they want to own the earth, is basically, in my opinion. But they say, we're bad, we're farting, we're making stuff, we're driving. But as I pointed out before, the worst times in human history had nothing to do with any of these ideas that they're trying to tell you is your fault now. And all of them had to do with the sun, the earth, and the cycle that they were living in. And thank God that some people figured out how to make it through. But can we, as a modern civilization, actually make it through, considering we are nothing like any of those other generations as far as we don't know how to do things? We don't know how to really interact with the earth in the way that they did at all, or very few of us do. Like, I found that gardening is quite easy as far as letting the plants do what the plants do and just trying to keep them happy. But other people, I'm sure you've seen examples of these little hippie farm co-ops and different things. Now, you see some that are ingenious and they're like, wow, they're doing permaculture and this and that. And then you see other ones that are so confused because they don't even understand that carbon dioxide is what plants breathe. And if you don't even understand the basic facts around plants, how are you going to grow them to eat them? And how are you going to grow them to eat them if the government is getting in between you and the proper resources you need to do that? And also, how are you going to do that if something happens in our environment, which, it may happen, that greatly reduces your ability to just do it on your own? There may come a time when you just can't do it on your own, or it's so hard to do it that you really need to have prepped for at least a decade or more. And we've talked about this before, that when people think about prepping some food, I don't think they're really getting the idea of what you need, how many pounds of food for how many years for how many people. And then on top of that, you can't just eat those kind of foods. You're going to have some kind of source of vitamins, fresh vitamins, and fresh proteins. You can't just eat stuff that comes out of a box. That'll keep you alive. That'll be the mainstay, and it's relatively healthy, but it's not as healthy as eating fresh foods. So, what are those masses of people going to do that don't even have 10 days worth of food or 2 weeks worth of food? And I can count myself in part of that. I have emergency backups. But as far as buying food from the stores, every time I go there, I feel like I'm in the wrong place, like I walked in the wrong store, because I know there's nothing in there that I actually want, because I can't help thinking about what it is that's in the box, in the bag, what's wrapped up there. And it just makes me want to go home and pick something out of my yard and chew on it.
It's the pretty pictures. They're trying to get you with the pretty picture. Don't let them do it. Don't do it. Because I'm wondering with the population, you think about going back to, let's say, the planned 500 million. Like, what do we really know about the year 535 AD? Was the population of the planet still 500 million? Below that or so? Because when you look at population charts, it stays pretty steady from like the birth of Christ era all the way through until let's say 1700s, and then suddenly with the invention of the steam engine, it rises to 750 million, and then shortly right after we get oil and electricity, and it goes vertical. So you look back in the history charts, and it goes, about 500 million, 4 or 5, thousands of years back. It's like 250 million, and then it was 500 million, and it stayed like that. So, I mean, is that truly the history of it, or is it like this? It did come to 8 billion, it got knocked back, but then just readjusting the history, turn everybody into serfs again, make it appear that everybody's making gains again. With technology wiped out, we would go back to a feudalist society. Those who had the knowledge or had books would be, the land owners, that sort of thing. But truly, what's the history of our planet? What was the true population of the world at 535 AD? Because bringing it back through, it seems like this rodeo has been ridden many a time before, that it's not new. Nothing's new. It's just replanned for the current age and the current era to make it's faster. It's a speedier event, because you have to think about, we're heading into Aquarian energy, which is fast anyway. It's a much higher vibration frequency-wise. Aquarian energy is always fast, and enlightenment, movement of the mind, these sort of things. So obviously digital age would have to accompany the Aquarian age. So these billionaires and all of these moneyed families are super into this, and I see why, and I understand why. The energetic flow follows the things in the heavens. So if you go back in time and forward in time, the slowness of like the depths of the Kali Yuga, they could get away with pre-printing press or at the edge of the printing press. Notice when all these things started to happen, right around the shift of the bottom of the Kali Yuga, the printing press comes out, 1300s, and then we're right at the depths of the very bottom of the Kali Yuga, right around 1600. And then suddenly we start to come out of it, and notice these last 400 years, everything has just sped up until we reach this Aquarian energy. Now we're in the Dwapara Yuga. It just entered a few years ago in earnest in terms of how it's calculated that you're definitely in the new cycle. And that's a rising frequency cycle. Well, if you knew the same cycle was coming, but you had 10,000, or you understood the entire precession, the full 25,750 year cycle, if you understood that and exactly where the Aquarian energies were going to roll into, how long that would take, if you already had the tech hundreds of thousands of years ago, like this internet, and it's just been taken underground every reset, well, you'd pop out and go, okay, we're coming into the Aquarian energy. That's a 2,000 year cycle. All right, bring out the computers and the smartphones again. Or maybe we come back into another cycle or so. We come back in. Oh, we're heading into the Kali Yuga. Oh, get out the chains and the priests and the red hot daggers again. Just something like that. Each energy frequency flow, they understand how much flow could be given in the frequency field itself. Think of it as an electrical frequency that changes with the thousands of years. Those who had that knowledge would understand the quickness. Now, see, it can't be coincidental that we are at the speed of light in terms of communication and payment systems at the same time that the Aquarian energies are kicking in at the speed of light and make everything just move that much faster. And then lo and behold, there's another layer on top called central bank digital currencies, and a layer on top of that called digital rationing cards. And everything is going to flow much faster this cycle. I think about the currency collapse and the de-dollarization. It's not going to unfurl like it did in, say, Weimar Republic, where it took 4 to 6 years for that cycle to run its course. This is going to be like in and out in 1 or 2 years. Things are happening so much faster. Think about how much more quickly we can throw money around the planet, move funds around the planet, switch markets in an instant, switch trading vehicles, switch markets, stocks, bonds, anything at any market in any country across the planet is literally at just a few seconds to move it. So with the debacle here happening with the US dollar, it's not going to take years for this unwind to occur. It's going to take as quick as it was to drain Silicon Valley Bank as money moving that fast across the planet into safety markets, which are now being set up, backed by gold. And I just saw something where they're down to, I'd have to look at it again. It was off the bullion exchange today. The warrant for deliverables is giving us about 0 ounces at the moment on silver. I'll have to find that thing and send it off to you. But the way it's moving, man, it does seem a little bit. Oh, and one last thing here. That's the whole reason I started talking. I just got off on this random tangent with you here. You mentioned the TikTok law based on whatever it is. So in the fine print of the law, if you use a VPN to access, and it says anything outside the realm of what you're not allowed to access, an app that's forbidden, etc., using a VPN will give you 20 years in prison and a $25,000 fine. And lo and behold, off the Wall Street Journal just today, April 6, 2023, decentralized cryptocurrency markets threaten U.S. national security, the Treasury says. So think about that. If they put this TikTok law in and suddenly you're not allowed to access crypto in any way, shape, or form, all the markets are closed down, even Coinbase is put out of business, nothing on any of the stock markets, none of the GBDC or anything like that, derivatives of Bitcoin on a stock market, nothing. That's all completely dried up. And if you even use a VPN to access that money, that market, that cryptocurrency, that is probably going to fall under the same law. You will not even be able to use a VPN to access your online wallet or some other overseas market. And if you are caught doing so, you'll be given 20 years in prison. Now, for me, that's a little steep. Like a VPN where you're not allowed to access another app. What is that going to be? A news app from China or from Russia, for example? Am I not allowed to access a news app coming out of, say, Turkey? Because they're talking about what's happening in Central Asia, which is 180 degrees opposite of what we're being fed over here. You know, how deep does it go? VPN, you're not allowed to access any of the apps. Well, those apps are probably going to relate to cryptocurrency and news and flow of information as well. So this thing is a little bit scary, this TikTok thing, because I know it's going to be used for both. Now, how quickly will it come in, or how abided will it be, or what kind of enforcement could they actually have in terms of taking your physical body out of your physical home because you accessed an online thing which is non-physical, and you looked at it and you thought about it, but there was no physical interaction except your mind interpreting the information. That's the only thing that happened. There was no physical touching interaction at all. There was no third dimensional space shared between that interaction. It was only your mind processing the information. Like, how scary is that when it comes down to you're not even allowed to look at other information? The only information that will be deemed necessary or for you to availably preview will be our system, our information, and if you go even one iota outside of there, we will lock you up for the rest of your life because we don't want others. And eventually, you know, with the scare tactics, as you said, in the 30s, this happened quite a bit. It'll be a shock and awe campaign, and nobody will be accessing crypto. Then suddenly the decentralized cryptocurrencies, according to the Wall Street Journal, will no longer be a threat to U.S. national security. You see how that works? If you reverse it, you implement one to stop the other. Uh-oh, I guess Jeff Berwick was right over the dollar vigilante.
Yeah, I forgot to bring up the VPN part because that's one of the scariest parts about it. Well, basically what they're saying is you're not allowed to have privacy on the internet, period. And then the idea that somebody went to jail or is going to go to jail for 10 years for a joke, for a meme, it kind of shows you the direction of where these new powers that they're grabbing are going to go. And how long will it last? Like, how long will people put up with it? It seems like the answer is kind of evident because it's been creeping in and creeping in and creeping in. And now we live in a world. See, it's very bizarre to me because if you went back and you told people in the 30s, say, that in the future on television, you can watch a man beat a woman almost to death in a sports ring, and people will cheer, and you will, if you have a problem with that, you're going to get jumped on by the mob. But think about that. Even when I was a kid, one of the things that I was hammered into as a kid from my dad, from my grandpa, from my uncles, from every man that I met that tried to, give an example of what a man should be. All of them agreed that hitting a woman is the most cowardly, low thing that somebody could do. Right. But, welcome to 2023 where you can pay it. You can watch it on pay-per-view. And if you say what I'm saying, which is the truth, that a man is literally beating a woman in front of people for sport, and if you say anything about it, you're going to get in trouble. And then now, if you've looked at the Supreme Court ruling, they're saying that you can't stop anybody from joining whichever group of sports that they want. All of those years that women wanted to be equal, here we are. You're no longer really equal because you're second best. So, and then you're watching clowns on TV, literally clowns. And I say clowns because they look like they came from some kind of demonic circus. And I'm not picking on them. I think everybody should be able to live however they want to. But whenever groups start enforcing their ideas on you, all the way to the point where the governments of the world back them up, it's a scary time to be alive. And that they were pushing it a little bit in Europe. I remember in Spain, people were getting arrested because they didn't like the opposition of government, that they felt like they were on the opposition. People were getting arrested. And then, in England, they started arresting people for praying. And it just goes on and on. So that's the weird world, upside down world that you're living in. Where things don't even make sense that you're looking at. And of course, people can't pay attention to serious things when everything about the civilization is making them debate and argue about things that really doesn't matter as far as filling your belly, as far as having some kind of civilization that works, where people can get along with each other and transmit ideas back and forth to each other without someone threatening violence over an idea or threatening prosecution over an idea. And I mark my words, within the next 3 years, they will transition this fad over to the climate. They've been trying real hard for probably 20 years, but I guarantee you in the next 3 years, if you continue on the path of saying that you don't believe the experts at the IPCC or at NASA, or pick your poison, any authoritative source of news, information, science, etc., if you are not towing the line with what they are telling you, even though you know for a fact it's not correct, there may be repercussions to you. They may take away your, digital rationing card where you and your family just don't eat. And if you think about that, they've already tested the waters with this, with the lockdown that we had, where, you just weren't allowed to go to some places and do business with them. And if those people bucked the system and stayed open, they got their license taken away. And then they had to pay a lot of fines, further putting them into debt, crushing them. And I was looking at an article earlier about small business. Here it is. More small businesses file for bankruptcy at record pace, surpassing even the COVID crash. So that tells you exactly how many avenues around the system that you're going to be able to have when it comes to food, tools, and know-how. All of these avenues that we've been taking for granted in modern civilization for the past 100 years, I'm going to say, might be about to go bye-bye, simply because you're just not allowed to do it, or you're just not allowed to think that way, or they've already kind of sewn up the markets on, in some places you live, you can do construction, and other places you have to pay people that have licenses. If you get caught, you can get in trouble. But the heart and soul of America has always been, do it yourself, DIY, know it yourself, do it yourself. I don't know what happened to that civilization, but that's the civilization that we need to promote, and that's what needs to come back, or we're doomed.
$12 cauliflower. That's what we become, $12 cauliflower. Wow. But, I went out to grab a drink of water when you were talking. When I came back in, I thought that I missed part of the conversation because I was under the impression that you were a circus performer running around with horses after a demonic a clown show. So I think I missed part of that. But anyway, the way it interpreted in my brain made up for an interesting conversation to listen to the rest of that go. And, actually, I don't believe half of what the NASA forecasts are out. They're already so far off on this solar cycle, even counting the sunspots. If they can't even understand the sun enough to give you an accurate count on what the sun is going to do in an established science, then everything else should be off as well. I cannot wait for the solar cycle to end and then see how far off the mark people have been that were the quote unquote experts. And this movement of what you can talk about or not talk about, in a bizarre way, are we going to have to form a secret society ourselves to keep the information flowing from generation to generation? I mean, are we the ones that have the knowledge that can pass it down? Absolutely, yes. Like secret books. I got books on astronomy and I bought a couple books at an estate sale and all the minerals that goes through them with really high quality color pictures. I mean, are these kind of sciences going to be forbidden? Everything's made out of cake. No, it's not. There's actually element number 19. No, take him to jail. He actually identified an element. He must have a forbidden book. He doesn't believe the cake. Everything is made of cake narrative. Is it going to come down to this kind of imbecile clown show kind of thing where established sciences will be forbidden? Because you go through all these chapters of history and it seems, again, like it's a repeating cycle. A repeating cycle of there was some sort of apex reached, natural cataclysm came, seriously wiped it back, wiped the planet back to enough to subsist, to start a full new civilization again, which reaches its apex. You can look at the larger ones on 1,000-year cycles, but it does seem that things are happening faster because the Antiquitech from the 1600s is still around. So they couldn't play that same old, hey, we just invented this to pull, energy from the air. It has to be probably 2 cycles or 3 cycles before the tech is recycled again. Because you couldn't get away with in 400 years from now saying, hey, we just invented the iPhone, when they're digging up a bunch of iPhones from sites or finding them in houses that were 400 years old, buried in mud, that are still visible around the planet. It just wouldn't work like that. 1,200 years into the past, a little murkier, yeah, you could get away with recycling technology. Because you can't tell me from the Roman era all the way until 1700, they didn't invent a single thing. Really? Like they were at compressed air back at the year, say, 2000 prior. They were at compressed air already. They understood. You squeeze down the air, it's bottlenecked up, and if you give it a little opening, it'll shoot out of there with a lot more force. So from compressed air technology, understanding, in the Roman bathhouses and afar across the Roman Empire, compressed air was it. From year 0 to, let's say, year 100. Now, we're from year 100 all the way to year 1700 until they started using steam along with compressed air. Where is that 1,700 years of disappeared history? Are we supposed to believe that we would sit around for 1,700 years and not invent a single thing if you already had compressed air, which would allow you to spin something faster for manufacturing? Established technology, and we couldn't move the needle even 1 iota except make a bigger mast out of wood for a sailing ship over the last few thousand years? Really? Like sailing didn't even improve. So from the Phoenician times, are you telling me that there was no motors created and everybody just used sails for what, 2,500 or 3,000 years, and there was no innovation in 3,000 years on top of that? Like, really? Am I supposed to believe that? I just can't. That's so far-fetched, so whimsical that it can't even be true. The baseline is human ingenuity. Baseline is creating a better mousetrap. That's how we're wired as a species. That's what our survival is about. Doing it faster, doing more efficiently for your survival. That's the only reason that there's 8 billion people. If we did not have that baseline default setting as a human, a Homo sapien sapien, there would be 0 of us left here. There would be none. So you can't, again, this whole timeline and history thing, we're coming to the reset again right this second. We're in the reset. It's ongoing as we speak. How far down does it go? When does it stabilize? And looking back 500, 800, 1,000 years in history, how will they define this time as what? The collapse, like 535 AD? Hardly anybody even knows about that chapter of history. One of the world's greatest events, largest population decline events ever in the last 12,000 years, and we barely hear about it across Europe. So what else is hidden? That was only 1,500 years ago. Bottleneck down in population, and boom, we're right back up again. I wonder what happened in that. Anyway, I'm rambling. I'm going to go live in a yurt and just chill, raise my own cattle, have my sheep, trade with others around me that stay off those supply chains, and then we still need steel. So what then,
That sounds like the way to go. But, you were kind of joking about secret societies. I've been thinking about that for a long time, that must have been a necessity in the ancient past for some people. Others tried to hide knowledge from other people as that being the reason. But in today's world, with things like this TikTok thing and, the NDAA and the Patriot, I mean, the list goes on. You could just think of any number of bills from the state to the federal government that violate your constitutional rights, even though they say they don't. They use them. They get in trouble. They're not allowed to spy. They get caught. They get in trouble. Nothing happens. And now they're just openly saying we're going to do that. They're going to track, trace every last bit of the human domain. So literally now, as a modern person, you're probably going to have to set up one single room in your house, because let me tell you how far technology's come. For a fact, if, for instance, a government entity or a tech company or anybody that had enough technology to do it wanted to hear or see what you were doing specifically, I'm not that important, so hopefully they're not watching me, free show if so, whatever. But if you think that they can't do it, let me just tell you all the ways that they can do it. You think you're going to take your battery out of your phone? No. They can power it with the battery out, and they can operate it with the camera. They can listen to the mic. You think unplugging everything? No. They got everything in your houses now. If you have any kind of modern, stuff in your house, microwave, refrigerator, coffee maker, etc., these are all outlets that they can listen to you and watch you and keep track of you. You think, you're in a room with nothing in it. You think I'm safe. No, you probably got LED bulbs in there. Guess what? Those things also can not only see what's going on in the room, but they can transmit information that you don't even know you're receiving. So we live in a really bizarre world where we're going to have to basically have a yurt that has no electronics in it. And not only that, some kind of way to dampen around it, just to have a tiny little last vestige of privacy in this world. And people think that's not real, but that's what's going to happen. You're going to have an electronics room, and it's going to be set up just like you explained how people were in China, where they were over speaking and talking loud so that the authorities knew that they weren't saying anything bad or doing anything bad. We're going to have to do that in our own homes. You're going to have to do that at the store when you go to the store. You're going to have to do that at the bank when you go to the bank. And then slowly, you're not even going to deal with people. There's just going to be automation that is also recording everything that you do and reporting it, putting it in a file. And now we're talking about this TikTok thing, and they're talking about they want to know what's in every little message in the social media. So they want to get into your private messages, not like they already don't or can't do that, but they want to do that. So not only we're going to have little secret societies where we talk in private, share books and information, but we're also going to have to just do that so we could save it for future generations, because mark my words, the digital book burning campaign is not over. It's going to continue at an exponential rate.
Yeah, what could we carry through with us? Obviously printed books. But would the information be so valuable that then you would need to transfer it handwritten and hand drawn into a brand new book? And could you see some of these manuscripts handed down through the ages? And the monks thought it so important that, they would do letter by letter to retranslate books, or not to retranslate, but just pass down books from one spread out into 20. So you have a room of like 20, what would be considered monks or adepts of somewhere in Europe, say 1300s, 1200 AD, somewhere 1300 AD, approximate age, where, you had 20 religious men in a room, and one person would read out the word in the letter, and they would write one letter, and then everybody would check that it was the correct letter, and then they would come. Now you're talking about what would be 200-page books of the day, called out letter by letter and rechecked before they actually put the next letter in place. It takes months to redo and rewrite just one book, but then they had multiple copies of it. And you got 20 copies of the same thing that was one original manuscript. Is that where you're going to get as a hand-down copy from, oh, yeah, this person David had it 300 years ago, in the year 2024 was the description of how the magnetic field changed, because they're going to understand magnetism and numerology and numbers and mathematics 300 years from now. 600 years from now. Mathematics is the universal language. So things like that, quantifiable percentages, and these things are going to stay through the ages. If he told me something dropped 30% in efficiency in the year 2000, no, in the year 0, birth of Christ, or even 1000 BC, something dropped in efficiency 30%. Okay, that means the exact same for me for right now. If something drops in efficiency 30%, it drops 30%, right? It's easy to take those numbers across time. But is it going to come to that? I don't know. I think a lot of this is in the mind. I think the AI is gaming everybody to make it play out. I'm even wondering how many people are real out here that are being given to us on the screens of the day. Everybody seems to be firewalled off from everybody else. So I'm just wondering, when you see these programs out there, knowing the capability of tech and AI, and I've used ChatGPT, fascinated by it, scared by it too, of just how realistic it is in comparison, without mistakes, to a human to give you an answer in the way that it's giving the answer in a phraseology you ask for. Now, whether the outcome is what you exactly asked for, okay, but that's called a debate in human terms. It's freakishly accurate and freakishly well written, as to the point of, yeah, that's scary. But is it thousands of years ahead of where it is right now at ChatGPT, or tens of thousands of years? Did it survive the last ice age reset, and it's 100,000 years advanced, playing us as an individual in a holographic reality, building that around you? Because a lot of people that this AI and screen world touches, they never leave the local areas. I mean, if you look around at the world's percentage of population, of what they're fed, are they ever going to go to the place where they were fed the information about, in terms of the politics and economy and all these things. Like, what's the real percentage of people outside they're going to fly and actually get to a destination, especially now with all the bottlenecks in travel? Even prior to COVID, I mean, how many people were going off to Yemen to really see what was going on over there? How many of you visited Oman on a friendly holiday? You just didn't. So whatever the news was telling you was what it was telling you. You couldn't verify that or not verify. How many people of you have friends from Oman that still have family in Yemen? Right? You don't. Very few people do. So is it the reality given to us by a screen off an AI feed that's watching you through the social media that'll tap in and feed you a nugget of something your mind might have been looking for, or your mind was trying to back up a piece of information to string it together to make a thesis from? You know, how deep does it really go? Because I believe this reset we're in here is this is millions of years old resetting technology and like AI out in play right now for the whole planet. It's weird to even go down that rabbit hole, but millions of years, not hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands or even the last 100 years of tech. No. This is something that is itself, the hologram is in play right now, running sub-programs in the hologram for the reset. That's the only way I can rationalize it and make it make sense. The way that all these things are in sync and in motion to get everybody's emotions to push through at a certain time to skip over this upgrade of electrical frequency that's moving through our solar system and the outbound stars that are connected to our star called the sun. It's trying to put us to sleep into a coma, so when that energetic wave sweeps through, humanity is truly asleep. Spiritually, mentally, physically. And then as soon as the bump is over, perhaps there's some other new run up in economy. Oh, wait, the BRICS currency ready to take over and boost all of those underdeveloped nations and turn them into United States in the next 70 years with a wealth. It's a pendulum of movement. Because 100 years from now, if the reset goes on and it takes us down like the 1640s, 1650s, 79 AD, whatever, history will be rewritten in a completely different fashion. So really, do we know what happened 80 years ago? The catalyst, truly. Take it back a cycle, the Weimar Republic, a useless, costless war. I mean, Germany couldn't fight that or pay for it. And you just go back after chapter after chapter after chapter of history where these either regional resets occur, wars to destroy the old antiquitech around the planet, and to set up new narratives. Because after World War II in Europe, it was very difficult to find the true history of Europe. So much stuff had been broken, bombed, burned, on fire. Imagine how many libraries were destroyed, how many rare manuscripts were buried forever. Like truly, after that war for 4 years over there, it was just destroying all of the ancient knowledge, all of the old knowledge. There was nothing left. They went just through castles and had bonfires of the manuscripts and things. Keep the soldiers warm. You know, that's the story. So anyway, I think we're at it again. And I can't shake the feeling that there's something behind this whole AI push right at this time with the central bank digital currencies on a frequency change across. Everything's just way too coincidental for it to be coincidental.
Yeah, they're not going to be watching us with people. They're going to be using the AI to flag everything and all that stuff we were talking about. You know, and some people in the chat were joking around about not talking in front of the cameras and stuff. Or not talking in front of their devices. And it makes me think of the movie A Space Odyssey 2001. You remember he was like, although you took great care to unplug all the microphones, I could see your lips moving, Dave. You know, it just makes me think of that. That is exactly what's going on, is AI is penetrating every avenue of, you know, and we've talked about it before. It's writing news articles, it's writing movies. People are all into the chat GPT and all of these things. But one thing, I don't really think that the AI that they allow the public to mess with is ever going to give us anything beneficial. And the reason I say that is because I've been playing around with them, and I've noticed that although they come up with really unique looking things, everything in the artwork or the story writing or whatever it's doing is all stuff that reflects human beings. It never will come up with nothing new. It doesn't have a soul in that way, or at least it doesn't yet. But it does make you wonder, with all of the articles talking about FRBs and radio signals from outer space, they've been softening the idea. I don't think it would be that hard to transmit an AI, broadcast it to another planet. And that's a rabbit hole to go into, and who knows if that's true or not, but we do know it's possible. And not only that, I brought up before this movie called Listening, and now that was just a few short years ago. So it was like in 2014 that movie came out, and now there is literally software, and they're talking about it at the World Economic Forum, that will follow your, basically read your mind and tell what you're thinking about, down to literally what it is you're thinking about. So we're in an era where AI and the technology that is the peripherals for it can read your mind. It knows how you're feeling. It knows what you're going to buy. They have these algorithms that know exactly when you're going to go shopping, how much money you're going to need for your bills. Matter of fact, I get emails from the power company and stuff. They're already telling me what my bill's going to be before I get it. So it's obviously not even being metered at this point. It's being decided upon. And that's going to continue on until there's really nothing you can control other than putting a seed in the dirt, at least for now, and growing that food. And at least that way you can have your own connection to the earth that has nothing to do with what's going on. And I was just skimming over an article about, again, Elon Musk, more of his stuff's falling out of the sky. I wonder why that is. Do you think it has anything to do with the collapsing magnetic field or the hole in the ozone or the activity of the sun or the other planets? Because no matter what you read in today's world, it's all in the context of how you did something personally as a human being. And here's another last thought and a question for you. If the food becomes so rare due to natural or man-made causes around the world. So think about herd numbers, cattle numbers, chicken numbers, etc. And if somehow those numbers reduced, like they're claiming that they are, and that they probably will be in the future, guess what other animal could be on the menu? I mean, there's 8 billion of them. So when things collapse, there is going to be a food source available to the masses. It's just not the food that you're going to want to share with people.
The breakfast of champions. Oh, you're bringing back a Wheaties. Oh, gag me with the spoon, dude. Yeah, you got to think about airplanes full of gold and electrogravitics craft. Are we off world already? I am not sure, but it does seem like we're tweaking through the universe here. What is next? It's about trying to enjoy the days too, because some of these things that we're about to witness in the skies are going to be, once in 2,000-year events. The field-aligned current, Steve, that filament that appeared in the last solar storms of a week ago, where they sighted aurora all the way down in Florida, southern Texas. These types of energetic flows with the magnetic field waning, it's going to be a beautiful experience to behold. Now, if you can keep your mind out of the mind meld psyop and stay into the natural forces in the natural world, it seems that a lot of this stuff passes you by. If you don't look at it, don't buy into it, and keep your eyes to the skies, you'll be surprised how a day's news passes, but nothing has affected you. You see directly prices are increasing in the stores. Now, I haven't seen the yields coming out yet, but some of that damage that they replanted from the record cold temperatures here in Tennessee, right when the winter wheat was emerging, they replanted quickly after that time, set the seed in dormant, and it's emerged back down in wheatgrass now. So I think they switched midstream. It looks like the fields are coming in because I know they replanted a huge amount of fields where I live. I see some things changing, but I see some things staying the same. I know those fields being harvested around where I live could be put into the community here, but are they GMO growing? I'm not sure. I see some things with my own eyes, but when you look at the greater, wider news, they're talking about 65,000 farmers not being able to plant in California because of the enormous amount of rainfall. But, is that a true number, or is it just some and they're trying to blow it out of proportion to give excuse for food shortages and rising food prices? Not sure. What you can have control of is what you can do with your hands and what you can see in the skies with your eyes. Thanks for joining us tonight. Ransom, Godwin, and David DuByne signing off Revolution Radio. Studio A, Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight, Mini Ice Age Conversation. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to Revolution